This is the Awaken Life podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Scott Landis. How can you live an absolutely fulfilling and purpose-filled life, maintain a passionate, intimate relationship, all while raising kids and growing multiple streams of income? That's the big question we seek to answer on this podcast by interviewing people who are already doing it. One thing we know for sure, it takes a community to do it well. So thank you for being a part of the Awaken Life community. Looking forward to growing with you. Now on with the episode. Welcome to the Awaken Life podcast with Scott Landis. And today my guest is Dr. Archana Shrestha. And she's a board certified emergency physician, certified physician life coach, best-selling author, speaker, and entrepreneur. She's co-founder and chief wellness officer of Women in White Coats, a multimedia lifestyle brand dedicated to uplifting and empowering women doctors through courses, conferences, and coaching. She is also the founder of the Mama Doc School, where she coaches Dr. Moms on lasting weight loss through her Mama Doc's Weight Loss Accelerator. Archana's mission and purpose is to uplift and empower working women, in particular women doctors, as she is one of those. Archana, welcome to the Awaken Life podcast. So glad to have you here.
It's so good to be here, Scott.
Yes. And as we were just talking before we got going here, we've known each other for a while originally through Beachbody, my wife, Tanya, and you go way back there. And then I got to meet you after that, got to meet your husband, your kids. We've been on trips together. So that's our connection. And, we've just stayed in touch throughout the years. Wow, how long ago was that, by the way? Is that 2015, maybe?
Yeah, 2015. Okay. And don't forget to mention that, remember when Ross and I did our vow renewal, you were the one there who sort of officiated that.
Yes, that is a fun fact. I didn't know if I was okay to mention that or not, but yes, that is a time in my life that was a really highlight to be able to I don't know if it's an official officiating of a wedding, but it's the closest thing I've ever done. And you did some vow renewals, and you guys asked me to be a part of that, and it was an honor, and it was awesome. We did that. Where were we? Punta Cana, was that? Or
Punta Cana, yeah, and the Dominican, yep.
And I have pictures of that, and yes, that was definitely a highlight. Yeah, something cool. I've never done that before or since, so definitely a highlight for me. So thanks for mentioning that. So so you're how long have you guys been married now?
Our wedding anniversary is just coming up, so we are at 16 years.
16 years and two kids, boy and a girl. How old are they?
Yeah, I've got a son and a daughter. My son, their birthdays are coming up too, right around the corner. They're about to be 13 and 11.
13 and 11. Wow.
Yes,
oh boy,
we'll
you're getting into that
teen in the house.
Teen stage. Yeah. It's a whole nother world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what's life at the household post-COVID? Like, are they back in school? Is everything back to normal, or has anything been like completely transforms post-COVID for your family and your household?
Well, post-COVID, I mean, my kids are back to everything. School life is back to normal for them. But COVID was a real awakener for me. I think that, using kind of the buzzword of your podcast there, but, and in fact, so basically I could share a little bit about my story, but I am an emergency physician and trained to do that. And I always, from the time I was a kid, knew I was going to be a doctor, right? So my mom is a doctor. I grew up helping out in her family medicine office that she had. In fact, I often say that her family medicine office, her practice was basically like a family business in terms of like, I was like the secretary on the weekends. This is like in my teen years, I would like answer the phones and like file away charts and things like that. and put patients in their room, and like the patients all knew me. And My mom
And
would
where
make my
was this
brothers like,
geographically?
oh, in the Chicago suburbs,
Okay. And you're still
which
in
is
the
where I grew up.
Chicago area, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
am.
All right. Continue.
Yeah. And so my brothers would like clean up, like do some vacuuming and stuff like that. They had
Mhm.
the easy job, but my dad would do the billing. So it was kind of like our whole
Wow.
family was involved in the business.
That's
And
so
so I
cool.
grew up, yeah, I grew up when my mom was being a working mom, she had 3 kids. She would oftentimes take us with her on rounds because we were just like with her and she didn't have anyone else to watch us. So she would take us
Hmm.
to the hospital. We would round. Sometimes we would sit in the doctor's lounge. Sometimes we would go with her and see the patients. And the patients were always so excited to see her kids because they loved, most of her patients just like loved her. And so,
Hmm.
so I grew up around medicine and definitely, my parents wanted me to also become a doctor. And my parents were like, well, they wanted me to become a professional. And so like my options sort of were like become a doctor, become a lawyer, go into business, or become an engineer. And I was like, well, out of those 4 options, definitely being a doctor was like the best one for me.
Hmm.
And so went to college, went to med school, and ended up in emergency medicine and choosing emergency medicine. And it was the only field I really wanted to do once I was in med school.
Mm.
And it was really fun and exciting. And it was like kind of felt like the place to be, like where all the exciting
Mm.
things are happening in the
Okay.
hospital. And I think I was a little bit of an adrenaline junkie back then, and just liked a lot of variety. And I liked also being the hero. I liked that I
Mm.
got to be the hero in the moment, and just really
Hmm.
save a life, right? And
Wow.
so it was really fun and a very exciting place to be. But I think one of the things is like after a while, it gets to be a little tough on you because it is so
Mm.
stressful and it's something that's
Hmm.
harder to sustain for a really long time. And I knew that going in. And in fact, my parents were like, are you sure you want to do this? And my mom being a doctor, she knew, what the lifestyle was like and what the potential downsides were. And everyone was like, oh, like there's such a high rate of burnout in emergency
Hmm.
medicine. I'm like, well, that's the only thing I want to do, And
Hmm.
I was like, I'm going to do it and just kind of pursue my passion. And but then, but then I actually went through a couple of rounds of burnout. And that
Mm.
mostly started to happen after I became a mom and had
Mm.
kids. And so it was just the juggling of mom life and mom responsibilities. And also, I just think inherently, like after you've given birth to a child, and I think dads go through this too, but especially moms, there's just this like really different sense that happens inside of you, where you're just like
Mm.
very connected to your child, especially when they're
Mhm.
small, when they're
Sure.
babies, and like they want nothing more than to be with you and you want to be with them. And
Mhm.
so it really came down to where priorities started to shift. And so I was like, man, I just want to be home with my kids. I remember how they would be crying when I would go to work sometimes because I would
Mm.
work, working in the ER. I'd work a lot of evenings, nights, and weekends. So times when they were like home, right? And so they would be like, I remember my daughter, my son having their hand up on the window, like,
Oh.
mommy, where are you going? Like when they were 2, 3 years old, as I was like
Mm.
pulling out of the driveway and
Mhm.
like tears
While
just
you're
coming
going
down
through
their
burnout.
yeah, while I'm going through burnout, seeing the kids like missing me and like
Mhm.
really just like, oh my God, like I just want to be home with them more, but also like wanting to work too and have a career. And so I think what ended up happening for me is that I was experiencing both professional and some parental burnout. Like on the one hand,
Mhm.
I was burnt out from my profession of like having a really stressful job, a lot of demands and expectations placed on us. Um, and then coming home and not being able to fully rest, even though my husband Ross is incredible and amazing, and he's always been such a supportive husband.
Mhm.
It's just that, the job of being a parent is 24/7. You never
Mhm.
get a break from it, right? Especially when
Right.
they're little and they're not sleeping through the night and all of those kinds of things. And so I noticed for myself that I wasn't feeling and it wasn't showing up as my best. I was having like carrying extra weights. I was huffing and puffing going up the stairs. But not only that, it was also a mental thing where I was like, I was not showing up as the generally happy person that I am at work, nor at home. And so it was like a real wake up call that something needed to change when I just lost it with my kids one day. And I share this story of like kind of my rock bottom of burnout was really when I just had this incredibly short fuse and I was home alone with the kids. And my son was like probably 3 years old at the time, just having like a typical toddler tantrum in the kitchen. And he didn't want to eat his food and he was throwing it all over the place. And then I blew up and had like basically an adult tantrum. And like I remember actually I was holding this ceramic bowl and I just threw it on the ground out of like frustration and my fuse just blew. And I was my son, I didn't throw it at my son or anything like that, but I just threw it on the ground out of frustration in that moment. And the ceramic bowl shattered all over the place. And my son was like screaming even more. He's like, "Mommy's scary, mommy's scary." And he ran away. And then later when Ross came home from work, he like ran straight up to my husband's like, "Mommy's scary." And I was like, oh my God, this is the worst moment ever. Like, I was like, I wasn't showing up the way I wanted at work. I wasn't showing up the way I wanted at home. And I was like, the last thing I wanted was for my kids to be scared of me. And so I was like, something's got to change. And that actually is what led me to Beachbody and my own physical transformation and finally deciding to take time for myself and how I met Tanya, your wife. And so that's kind of how I ended up starting along that journey.
Wow. Yeah. And I can just imagine, somebody who doesn't have kids is like, got those judgmental thoughts, right? But anybody who has kids is just heartbreaking right now because we've been there. It is the worst moment of your life. You just like, how did I get here? Especially if you're an entrepreneur, or a ER doctor. I'm sure that's even has its worst challenges, I would imagine. But most of the audience here is entrepreneurs, married with kids. And I think we are all heartbreaking, just hearing that and relating to that. And then to have your son say those words, just like, twist the knife, right? So, but it was a defining moment, it was used in your life to wake you up. And that's what those things are for, right? That's when we can turn those worst moments into, those defining moments that matter so much. And so the rest of the story is I know it's a roller coaster, but it's uphill journey and towards greater purpose and fulfillment. So yeah, we'll come back to that in just a moment. But I want to dig out a couple of pieces there. So talk about burnout. There's probably somebody listening who's in the middle of that burnout, the pre rock bottom moment, but they're seeing the signs and ignoring them and just keep pushing forward. Especially from a medical perspective, from a doctor's perspective, like, what are those signs? Like, what if, maybe go back to, the first signs of yourself. If you could go back there as your wiser self now, go back there and talk to that self of yours, that younger version of you. What were the signs? What did you need to hear to wake up, to snap out of it, to maybe avoid that rock bottom moment? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically, burnout is really a constellation of symptoms. And a lot of those symptoms are like lack of engagement at work, right? Feeling very cynical and doubtful about enjoying work or the importance of what you're doing, sort of feeling devalued, feeling overwhelmed, feeling exhaustion, right? It's a lot of frustration. And so a lot of it essentially boils down to a lot of feelings, right? Like, and I feel like everyone sort of experiences burnout in a different way. It's not like just like a one word definition. There's like a whole bunch of different feelings that kind of go into burnout. but it ends up being this pattern, right? Like that you just can't seem to get out of, kind of like this
Mhm.
ongoing funk. Um,
Sure.
but I think having the short fuse is one of the symptoms, and just
Mm.
like not being able to kind of control yourself. And my professional rock bottom came when I got a phone call from my medical director who's like, "Archana, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." But I knew I wasn't. I just had to say that to him.
Is this before or
So
after the other one?
this was kind of like at around the same time.
Okay.
And so I was like, "Okay, I'm okay." But he was like, "Well, we're getting complaints from nurses about your behavior."
Oh,
And I was like,
wow. There's a sign.
yeah, that was definitely another wake up call, awakening moment of
Mm.
like, oh gosh, like this has, not only showing up at work, showing up at home, and something's got to change. It was
Mhm.
just a definite moment of like, this is not me,
Yeah.
because I had like nobody's ever like complained about me. And
Yeah, you're so
for
sweet.
people who
How could
know
that happen?
me, yeah, for people who know me, like they know that like this is like so out of character.
Mhm.
In fact, like most of the nurses were like my friends, and I was like always
Mhm.
very, like got along with them really well. But it was just that, and that's another symptom of it, is like acting very out of character
Mm.
and not
Mhm.
like yourself, and kind of on edge, short fuse, critical, cynical,
Mhm.
just very kind of pessimistic are all of those
Mhm.
symptoms.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, a lot of people listening are married and, either seeing those signs in themselves or in their spouse. Like what was the effect on the marriage during those years? I mean, that's kind of a hard question because anybody who's been there, you're in that baby to toddler range. You're pretty much like, it's like you kind of forget you ever even are married. It's like that person's there, but you're like so in the trenches, you kind of forget about it. But as far as you can remember, what was the effect there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like a lot of like a little bit of, even though, like I say, Ross is such an amazing husband and he's always been very involved with the kids and the house and everything, always trying to do as much as he could, and he was also working full time. And
Mhm.
so but I think it was always like just I don't know what he was thinking, but what I was thinking is like, oh, I wish he would do more. Like, I wish this didn't all fall on me.
Mhm.
The thing is, as a woman, a lot of times the household responsibilities tend to fall on women's shoulders.
Mhm.
In my case, it wasn't that much more than what he was doing. It was slightly more, but oftentimes the grocery shopping, the cooking, the taking the kids to activities, to appointments, planning their birthdays, all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
right?
That
Like
adds
tends
up.
to fall on the shoulders of women. So it's oftentimes called the second shift, where women go
Mm.
to their first shift, like working outside the home, at the office, or wherever. And then they come home to the second shift of all the
Mhm.
responsibilities. In fact, there's been studies that show for the average woman and, couple, average woman, in a marriage, a couple, that the woman is usually doing a lot more of the household
Mhm.
responsibilities. And
Sure, I
so
believe it.
that is a huge reason why so many women do experience burnout, working women experience burnout. And what we do
Mhm.
know is we actually have data on this, that 56% of women doctors feel burnout
Oh,
or
wow. Okay.
experiencing burnout. And those are recent numbers in 2022.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, so that kind of leads to where you're at today. I mean, that's your focus. You work with um women doctors and so and particularly you mentioned in your journey you noticed you're not at your best mentally and not at your best physically. You mentioned the sign of it was harder to get up the stairs or something. You just kind of noticed it. Um, so and of course you had that Beachbody was a part of your story and helped you kind of break through all that. So that carries into the coaching you do now, the work that you do with particularly women doctors. So yeah, so what's the kind of where you're at professionally now? Like what's the focus of your career now?
Yeah. So basically what happened is like I ended up having a transformation like through Beachbody because I decided that I needed to do something about my burnout and wanted to have a physical change. I wanted to have a mental change. And I realized that I wasn't taking enough time for myself and I
Mm,
wasn't practicing. I didn't have any kind of self-care routine at all. And so I began on this journey to lose the weight and to just feel better and take better care of myself. And as I
mhm,
was doing that, my mental health improved. I felt so much better. I was able to get out of burnout.
mhm,
And then and that through utilizing Beachbody programs and having a coach there. And so what ends up happening then is as you make a transformation, like I lost 30 pounds and I also started to feel better and act better
mhm,
and show up better at
mhm,
work and home. Everyone starts asking you like, so what are you doing? Like, this is amazing. You look great. Your mood is great. Your energy is great. And so
mhm.
that leads them to say, well, like, what are you doing? And can you help me achieve that
Right.
too? Because like I was mentioning, 56% of women doctors are burnt out, and those numbers are equally the same or possibly worse with nurses too. And
Mm,
so in the whole healthcare industry, there's so much burnout going on. And and some of the burnout leads to things like overeating and like not taking enough time for self-care, right? And so people
mhm,
are kind of feeling not only just like physically, they can have like not feel their best physically, but then also like emotionally and mentally. And so,
mhm,
I mean, really, it all needs to be addressed. And so, one of the things I wanted to do is I decided that I wanted to coach others and start helping. And so I started doing that very part time in the beginning. And now it's become a larger and larger part of what I do. And, I say, and I began coaching back in 2015. And when the pandemic hit, I decided that I was going to go not I'm not like 100% not practicing medicine, but less and less I'm practicing medicine and more I'm doing coaching. So it's sort of been
mhm,
this transition
mhm,
of less work seeing patients and more coaching. And I also back in 2020 decided to no longer work in the ER and instead do telemedicine and just really make a shift out of hospital-based medicine and out of the ER and to really taking full control of my schedule
mm,
by doing telemedicine and really building my business further as a coach.
mhm. And that's the Mama Doc brand, right?
Yeah, that's the Mama Doc school.
Yeah, and so that's yeah, mamadocschool.com, mamadocschool.com. So you have we'll put this in the show notes. We have you have a free mini course, Secrets to Lasting Weight Loss They Didn't Teach You in Med School. So um you want to describe that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, there were a lot of things that were not taught about weight loss in med school. It was very much just like a very simple paradigm of at least okay, back in the day. I'm not like a new grad from med school, but
Right.
back in the day, I graduated back in 2004. So there wasn't actually much education about how to lose weight aside from okay, it's just a simple matter of calories in versus calories out and some very
Hmm.
simple principles of like you just have to exercise more and eat less. And we know that it's not quite that simple when
Hmm.
we talk about things like hunger hormones. And also for women, it can be very different as well.
Mm.
And so that is some of what I talk about in the course. But not only that, in my free mini course, but not only that, I really talk about the mindset shifts that really
Hmm.
need to happen to have successful long term lasting weight loss. And
Hmm.
that the most important organ for weight loss is actually your brain. And
Mm.
so that's some of what I dive into in that mini course. And while I did create it specifically for um, physician moms, it really does apply to anybody who's busy, like any busy person.
Mm.
Can learn something from this mini course, male or female, about the importance of getting your brain to actually work for you instead of against you in weight
Mm.
loss.
Nice. Okay, well, unpack that a little bit. So, the importance of your brain in weight loss. Like, what's the top few tips on that? Are you a business owner who's looking to sharpen your performance in health, wealth, and relationships? And do you want to take your leadership skills to the next level and grow your business to new heights? If so, I have something special for you. That's right, I'm talking about Awaken Life Academy, the Just Show Up training program designed to help you achieve your full potential as a leader and entrepreneur. Based on a Harvard Business Review study that showed the importance of regular and consistent training during times of economic hardship, our program is tailored to meet the specific needs of business owners like you who want to improve their health, wealth, and relationships while building a successful business, even in hard times. Our expert-led training sessions will provide you with the skills and the mindset needed to succeed in all areas of your life. We'll help you develop a strong leadership style, improve your decision-making skills, boost your confidence as a business owner. You'll also learn how to balance your work and personal life, maintain good health, and build strong relationships with your team, clients, and loved ones. With just one group session a month, you can join our community of like-minded business owners who share your passion for growth and development. Our group training format provides a supportive community where you can collaborate and learn from others, develop the personal discipline you're craving, and the determination to improve every aspect of your life and business. You'll receive ongoing support and guidance from our team of experts and the community, as well as access to exclusive resources and tools to help you achieve your goals. Don't settle for mediocrity. Join the Awaken Life Academy today and start unlocking your full potential as a leader and entrepreneur. To learn more or to register for the next group session, go to awakenlifeacademy.com.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, it's really managing your mind around the thoughts that you have about food, about your stress. You know, so many of us turn to food as a way to manage our stress, right? We call it stress eating, or we call it emotional eating.
I may have done that recently.
Right. So it's stress eating, it's emotional eating. It's basically, you know, like there's that whole phrase, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve, right? You've heard that one. But it's not so much that we're wearing our emotions on our sleeve, but like when we stress eat, we're wearing our emotions on our waistline and we're wearing our emotions on our body, right? And so as an emergency physician, I absolutely know stress eating like the back of my hand. Like that was something we did all the time. Like whenever the ER would get busy, like magically pizza would show up. Magically there'd be like donuts and cookies and like stuff would just show up. Like people were bringing it in and like people would just order it, you know? And so we would always have so much access to food, and it was always like bad, like unhealthy food. And it was just like our way of handling the stress too, you know? It's just like an immediate dopamine hit to eat something that tastes good, right? It lights up your sense of taste, and it like feels good for a second there. It's a little bit of a buzz. And it's like in those moments where like, you know, you can't just leave and go like meditate for 5 minutes. You're like, let me go. Let me like at least eat something and feel better temporarily in the moment. But what we know is that certainly adds up over time and can lead to weight gain. And it's basically what we call buffering. And it's a way to basically neutralize the feelings that you're having with food, turning to food or turning to anything outside of yourself to neutralize negative feelings. And for other people, that might be wine. For others, it might be Netflix. It might be going on Facebook or Instagram and just scrolling a bunch. It's just something to kind of like take away the intensity of the negative feelings. And so what we need to do ultimately to lose weight is to change the way that we process our stress, learn how to process our feelings without turning to food or anything else really. And that is a skill that most of us have never learned.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right? Why didn't they teach us that in school growing up, right? But yeah, managing, I mean, I'm in a similar business, and definitely the mindset and the thoughts, you know, the thoughts that create your feelings and create your actions is such a simple concept, profound as you can possibly get, because it really affects everything, but it is a skill that needs to be, it needs to be developed, so sort of like, getting better and better at lifting a weight, right? Getting stronger and stronger, being able to increase the amount of weight that you can lift, that exercise of working on your thoughts to get better results. That's a major part of what you do, right? The mindset piece.
100%. Yeah. It's all about minds, about looking at our minds, understanding it, and choosing intentionally what we want to think. Like, people often believe that we have no choices about our thoughts. Like, they just happen and they're just like happening to us, but we actually do have so much control about our thoughts, and we can choose what we want to think. And exactly as you were saying, our thoughts are what create our feelings drive our actions, and our actions are what create our ultimate results. Whether that's good results that we want to have or those things that we don't want to have. Like, ultimately, it's all coming down to our thoughts. And it's very easy to blame like a circumstance, right? Like, this thing is happening in the world, this thing is happening in my world, and that is what's causing me to go stressy. But it's actually our thought about that thing, which we do actually have control over the thought. And for us as doctors, one of the key skills that we never learned was to process feelings. In fact, we were sort of like discouraged from processing feelings because, for example, like when a patient would die, which we all saw in med school, like the code blue would happen and everybody would rush, and like, we would all try to resuscitate the patient, and maybe half the time we'd get them back, but not always. And so it was like, nobody was crying. Like, nobody would like cry, we'd be sad, we'd be upset. But then like there would be the one med student who was like new, right? Who would start crying, and everyone's like, oh, they're a newbie. Like, but it was just always it was almost like remarkable when someone would actually cry. We're like, oh my God, somebody's actually crying. And that just goes to show how strong the culture was of like, not like, almost just suppressing all those feelings, And so we were told, always like, put your patient first. It doesn't matter how hungry you are, how sleepy you are, how bad mood you are in, whatever, like you have to turn all that off. So you not only have to turn off your bodily functions for hunger, thirst, sleep, all of those things, but you also have to like not feel, because you're just like this machine, you have to be this very objective machine. And so that is something that like many of us have never learned how to do. In fact, I was just coaching one of my clients the other day, like literally like how to process a feeling, and, without having to actually react to it, without suppressing it, but just simply allowing it and like feeling it and letting it wash over you. And it was just like, oh my God, like she was like, oh my God, I never have done that before. And she's like probably in her 40s.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I've had that experience working with a lot of husbands, and working on relationship stuff. That's pretty common for them also to have no idea what you're talking about when you say, process a feeling, and then seeing them start to feel things and be able to process that for the first time. But you just kind of highlighted a couple of like bullet points of, how do you do that? But if you could unpack it just a little bit more. You mentioned, let it wash over you. So what do you mean by all that? Like, how do you, so the person that's in that box, that's like, what are you talking about? Process of feeling? Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. What do you mean? I've never done that. Like, what would you do? What would you encourage them to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the important thing to realize, first of all, is that nothing has gone wrong when you have a feeling, right? Like, so many times people are like even this client I'm mentioning, like she was like, her feeling was stress. And she was like, I shouldn't have stress, right? Like she was like, something's gone wrong that I'm having stress. It's like, no, you should have stress. And the thing is that half the time, 50% of the time, we're going to have positive feelings. 50% of the time, we're going to have negative feelings. That goes for everybody. Every human being on the face of the earth, half the time is having positive feelings, half the time is having negative feelings, right? And that is the number one thing to first of all realize, because we need to like be okay with having feelings, right? Whether it's stress, whether it's shame, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger, frustration, and learn that nothing has gone wrong, right? And so what I walked her through was, in which basically any of your listeners can do when they're having a feeling, is to first of all recognize it and be like, okay, what is this feeling, and name it. And in her case, I was like, what you need, like, I walked her through and I was like, okay, what you'll say is like, this is stress. I'm feeling stress. And, and I was like, okay, maybe you want to put your hand on your heart. Maybe you don't, whatever feels good to you. And so then I was like, tell me what stress feels like in your body. And I told her to do what we doctors are really good at, which is taking a history and physical. Like, if you've ever gone to the doctor, they're like, ask you a million questions. You're like, my stomach hurts. And then they ask you like 10 questions, like, well, where does it hurt? Like, does it move anywhere? Like, what does it feel like? Right. And so I told her, like, you're going to do a history on yourself of your emotion, just like we do as doctors. And we call it an H&P, a history and physical. And I was like, well, you're going to do a H&P on your stress. Like, where do you feel it? And she was like, okay, it feels like right here in the center of my chest. And it kind of feels like tightness, and it kind of feels like hot, and it kind of feels like maybe the color orange. And I was like, does it move anywhere? And so that is part of processing a feeling right there, because you're sort of stepping outside. You're like both being the watcher and the experiencer at the same time. Like, you're experiencing it and you're noticing it in your body, but you're also sort of stepping out of yourself to watch it as an observer. And so once we did that, then I said, okay, now imagine you're at the beach. She happened to live in California. I was like, you go to the beach often, right? And she's like, yeah. I was like, okay, imagine you're at the beach, you're standing at the shore, your feet are in the water, and just your feet are in the water, but the water is washing up over your feet. This is stress. Like, with every wave, it's stress washing over your feet, and then it goes away, and it comes back over you, and then it goes away, and it comes back over you, and it goes away. And we just breathe through all of that. And it literally took her like 3 breaths. And she's like, I feel better now. The stress is gone. And so what happens is, this is just a skill that so many of us have never been taught. And, and the more we do it, the less intense the feelings are, right? And the faster they tend to pass. And so she messaged me this week, and she was like, okay, I sat with it. And because I allowed the stress, I was able to just like stick to my food plan and eat my lunch as I had planned to, instead of like going to rummage around the office and look for, different things that I could buffer or neutralize my emotions with. And so that's kind of like the process of how to handle stress and like, or any feeling really. And so, and then she was like, well, the stress went away, but then I've had these other feelings. And I was like, what do I do with those? And it was like, same thing, same process for all of them, really.
Oh man, I'm so glad you walked through that, because I've been through that before, and it's so practical. So I just want to speak to the person listening who's like me, very analytical, very left brain. You talk about right brain and colors and, integrating that whole brain, and they're like, that's dumb. Like, I don't even need that. But I just want to encourage you, if that resonates, because, I can relate to that. I can relate to that, that mentality. And just over the last several years, working on, kind of integrating that whole brain, you do have to ask these seemingly silly questions, like, where do you feel it in your body? What color is it? What shape is it? Does it move? And those are some very practical questions to ask, but trust it. Trust that process. Trust that these simple questions will help you process feelings. And again, I don't want, I'm talking to that person, and if you're like, immediate reaction is just dismiss it as weird, or like that's silly stuff, don't do that. I want to encourage you to like, try it. Trust that if you let yourself identify these characteristics of a feeling, you'll get better at integrating that whole, you'll become a better whole person, right? Anything else on that, Archana?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think like for that person who like wants to resist that, it's like, well, what is the alternative, right? Like the
Yeah.
alternative for most people is turning to food, turning to alcohol, which, makes you hungover, turning to drugs, which obviously has consequences too. Just binge watching Netflix makes it hard to wake up, like, so what is your other alternative really,
Hmm.
And so is it like, what so I think it's just like doing the analysis too of like, well, what am I going to do with this? Or is it going on medication? Like sometimes people are started on anxiety medicines for this when
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
they could actually process it, right? Like they could
Hmm.
process anxiety. And I've seen people who are like, once they learn this key skill of like learning that, like, okay, first of all, it's nothing has gone wrong when I feel anxious. And it's just
Right.
something I need to work through and process. Maybe I don't need to be on this medication, So is
Hmm.
it the alternative could be like lifelong medication for depression or anxiety,
Hmm.
But if you can learn these key skills, and I'm not saying go off your medication if somebody told you to be on it, but like maybe this is something that can help.
Yeah, and the medication goes into that. For some people, it goes into that category of buffering, right? So you mentioned buffering, and just in case somebody hasn't heard that before, you mentioned it could be scrolling, it could be scrolling social media, it could be eating, could be binge watching a TV show. Um, I mean, it could be doing something healthy, like obsessively working out at the gym. Maybe that wouldn't be so called
Or
healthy, but
overworking too.
sure.
Overworking is another one.
Yeah, just drowning
Yeah,
yourself in
and
your
I
work.
remember yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in burnout, especially when I was dealing with like parental burnout, I was like,
Mhm.
maybe I'll just go to work some more and let my
Mhm.
husband deal with the kids, or else like the nanny will be there and let them deal with
Mhm.
it and I won't have to. But like I
Mhm.
I definitely, I've coached on burnout
Mhm.
and I had this one client, for example, like she is a family medicine doctor. She worked in like immediate care as well. She had like so many jobs, and she was also doing telemedicine. And whenever she was having an emotion that she didn't want to deal with that made her feel uncomfortable, she would just go on telemedicine and see patients. And it was usually like
Mm.
related to a fight with her spouse, and she just didn't want to deal with it. And so she would just go on telemedicine. It was just like a way of
Mhm.
her neutralizing that, because she's like, well, at least over there, I'm like productive. I know what to do, like I can handle it. It's just like normal things that I always do on the regular. And so definitely overworking can absolutely be a sign of like buffering, like you're just trying to avoid some uncomfortable
Mhm.
feelings.
Yeah. And buffering it by itself isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. It could be cleaning the house, obsessively cleaning. But what we want to highlight here is to be conscious of it, right? To the first step, just like when you're recognizing a feeling, is to recognize that it's happening, right? That buffering is happening. We do this. This is human behavior. We need it's a coping skill, another word for it, right? It's it's a way of dealing with stress or feelings, burnout, whatever that is, frustration, resentment. It's a way of dealing with it or avoiding it, distracting yourself from feeling it. So sometimes and it isn't great if you are using it like a crutch to avoid stuff, right? But sometimes we might choose consciously to buffer. Right? Would you want to touch on that real quick? Like, why would we
Yeah, I mean, I think,
consciously buffer?
well, the key here to understand, am I buffering or am I just like wanting to watch a TV show? Like you can't
Right.
be like, okay, all TV shows
Good
or all
question.
Netflix is
Yes.
buffering now, right?
Right.
Or every glass of wine is buffering. Like, no, the key here is there a net negative? If there's a net negative, then you know that you are buffering. And also
That's
the
good.
other key is like, am I doing this because I planned to and I intended to, and I just wanted to like plan to watch this show with my kids or whatever it is, right? Or this
Hmm.
movie, or I wanted to have a glass of wine with my spouse, like, is it that, or is it that you're trying to get away from a feeling? So
Hmm.
that's the key thing to ask. Am I trying to get away from a feeling that feels uncomfortable to me? And also, is there a net negative to this? So basically, that means like it's becoming a pattern, right? Like a pattern
Hmm.
of, like
That's
I used
key.
to go hide in the pantry and eat chocolate chip cookies, So there's a little bit of shame associated with that too, because I was like hiding the fact
Sure.
that I was eating cookies. So that's another way, too, if there's like, if you're trying to like hide it, right? And And then the net negative in that case was I was gaining weight, right? The net negative of binge watching with Netflix is that maybe it's hard to get up the next morning. The net negative of over drinking because you're trying to neutralize a negative feeling is that you're hungover, or maybe you start to have liver problems too after a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of counting the cost of all of that. But I think what you said that really is key is like, is it becoming a pattern? Sometimes it can be a healthy thing to buffer for a bit. And I think the key is consciously choosing it, right? Saying, okay, you know what? I could deal with this emotion right now, but I think I'm going to go take a walk. I think I'm going to go to the gym and punch on the punching bag for a little bit. I'm going to do a conscious buffering choice now just to kind of deal for a moment, and then consciously going back to I need to feel this feeling as the waves are crashing over my feet, right?
Yeah.
Would you say it any different? Would you add anything to that?
No, I agree. I agree with you, Scott.
Cool. Well, I think this has turned into a great episode about how to avoid burnout. And there's a lot of, twists and turns in the story, but I think that's a great kind of overarching theme to what we talked about today. All the way from like how to avoid it, or, what happens if you get to rock bottom. What is there anything else that you want to add to it or leave with the listeners when it comes to that overarching topic?
Yeah, the only other thing I was thinking about was, I was listening to your podcast. I'm like, oh, it's the Awaken Life podcast. And I was thinking about how back in 2020, when I decided to leave, and I think this just kind of
Leave what?
speaks to the entrepreneur lifestyle, leave the ER, right? So this isn't
Okay.
my environment. This is where I had been working, employed for like 12 years. So it was kind of like a big decision for me to decide to leave there. I had been at the same place for many years. It really shocked a lot of people when I said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to go do telemedicine. And I think like what COVID for me was like this, what I called my midlife awakening. I don't know if I'm considered midlife yet, but I'm 44. So I think that's in the range, but I call it my midlife awakening. Like so many times people call it like a midlife crisis, right? But I think like, there can be this itch. And I've seen other people write about this to kind of like do something different in your 40s, 50s, whatever. You start to listen to yourself. And I explicitly remember having these moments where I was sitting in the ER, knocking out a bunch of patients, and like, it's just so crazy busy. And like, while it's sort of in the storm of the ER and all the hustle and bustle of it, it was just like this moment of like, Archana, you were meant for more. Like, while this is really important, great work you're doing, you're saving lives here, but you were meant to do more. And so it took a lot of tuning out the rest of the world and what everybody else, sort of like society, what you believe society wants from you, right? Like what I believe my parents wanted from me, even, of like having this, like, and a lot of doctors face this, right? Like they think that I went to med school and I had to practice as a doctor full time until I'm 65. And like, if you don't follow that path, then like there's something wrong with you. And so that's sort of the like cultural landscape of the medical world. Like that's kind of like the messaging you're getting. And so it was like, it took a lot for me to go against the grain and be like, well, that may be the case for some people here, for some of my colleagues, but that's not me. Like there's so much more that I was meant to do. And so I really just kind of had to tune that out, connect with myself, my own purpose, right? And what I knew I was meant to do. And when I found coaching, that was what really kind of lit me up and made me realize like I was meant to do that. And so it was a journey to like, well, I mean, actually it's more or less in an instant you make these decisions, right? Like I'm like, I talked to my husband, we looked at our finances. I'm like, can we make this work? And so he was like, yeah. And he was really supportive. But aside from him, like I didn't consider anybody else's thoughts about it, including my own kids. They were like, "Mommy, we really want you to go to the hospital." And that was because I would bring them like treats sometimes from the hospital, like random like Jello and cake or whatever I found in the doctor's lounge or something, like cookies. And they were like, "Yeah, we want you to bring that for us." I'm like, "It's okay. That's not a good reason for me to stay." But like, it was just that decision to like take that leap of faith, do something different, something I had never done. I had never done telemedicine before. I wasn't even sure if I would like it. But not only that, what was really important to me was having freedom of time, to, of course, be with my family, but also to have enough time to like build my business, because building a business takes time. And so I wanted to grow my coaching business. I was very clear about what I wanted to do and what I no longer wanted to do. And so I feel like the word for 2020 for so many people was pivot. And that was like another word for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to be bold, take this decisive action, listen to myself, believe in myself, and leave this career, in terms of the full-time life of it, right? It was no longer full-time. I was doing telemedicine, and it was a really exciting time. It continues to be really exciting, but I just want to encourage anyone who might be listening, who's like, yeah, like doing the 9 to 5, and maybe they're building a business on the side, that like, you'll kind of know when it's the right time to leave, but to like really start to listen to yourself and tune out the rest of the noise and just get centered and focused in on what's true to you.
Yeah, I love that. It's definitely resonates with the theme of the show for sure. Love that. So when you think about what you're doing now, obviously going back to the story of being in the family business, growing up in this world, and then in med school deciding ER was the place for you because of the excitement and just that feeling of being the hero. I'm sure everything that's kind of led you each step of the way, those desires of your heart have also led you to where you are today. And so just to kind of round out the story, so now, I mean, you're a physician, you're doing telemedicine, you've got these coaching skills, you've got your own experience of surviving and thriving through burnout, and that's such an awesome niche. And so you mentioned, you can obviously work with anyone who's super busy and working through some of this stuff, but as far as like a physician mom, like who else can really speak to the stuff, the challenges that they're going through besides you? And that's why obviously you got the mamadocsschool.com. Now, we didn't touch too much on the telemedicine. I know that that's part of who you are. That would be another place for people to find you. I just want you to describe, like, if somebody's listening and they would be the perfect person that you would want to work with, what would be that profile? What would you like to encourage to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me would be on Instagram, and you can find me at Mighty Mom MD over there on Instagram. Same handle on Facebook as well.
Okay. And then, so that's how they can reach you. So what would be the ideal avatar, the person who is listening, who is in a certain situation, and whether it's do you take new clients for telemedicine too, or just looking for the coaching, or like what would their profile be?
Not so much on telemedicine. It's just I work I'm an independent contractor there. And that's an interesting piece, which I'll just say is, once I left my employment, I decided I'll never be employed again. But so I'm an independent contractor there, but that is not really like, and patients just kind of find me on the platform that I work on there. But the place where, I think I could help more of your clients or anyone who's really listening is really through burnout. That's something I've coached on quite a lot. I've helped women physicians through burnout, and I've also helped people through career transitions, and even, early people who are trying to figure out, like, do they want to leave their job? Do they want to start a business? Are they interested in learning about coaching? Any of those things, really. I've coached on all those areas. And of course, I've coached on weight loss and getting your mind to work for you in weight loss and wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. That was good stuff too. All right. Excellent. So I'll put the links for Instagram and Facebook in there. And so there's a free mini course, Secrets to Lasting Weight Loss, they didn't teach in med school. People can go to mamadocschool.com and get access to that. Other things are there as well. But that's the free mini course that you mentioned. Anything else before I let you go?
No, that's it, Scott. Thanks so much for everything. Thanks for having me here. I love the work that you're doing. And I do love even just the name of your podcast. And I think we should strive to have an awakened, very intentional life and to really make the most out of this journey that we have here.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Archana. Archana, Shrestha, thank you so much for being on the Awaken Life podcast. It's been good. I really enjoyed just the entire history of your story and how you unpacked it and how helpful. I think there are so many nuggets in there that I think is going to help a lot of people. And that's what I always strive for in every episode. So we definitely accomplished that today. So thank you so much for your contribution. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Life podcast. I've been your host, Scott Landis. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed and stressed out? It could be that you're out of balance or have a misalignment of your time and priorities. This month at Awaken Life Academy, we're featuring the Total Freedom Life Wheel, designed to help you uncover what might be off balance in your work, life, and other priorities. And then it helps you realign your priorities to your purpose. Check out the full training video and the free download at wheel.awakenedlife.com. That's wheel.awakenedlife.com for free access. Don't put this personal growth opportunity off. Go get it now and start to experience the freedom that balance can bring to your life. Go to wheel.awakenedlife.com.